Hello and welcome. This is Heavy Business. I'm Aaliyah,
And I'm Curtis.
and today we are here with Nick Teeter, the General Manager at Frontiers North America. Thank you so much for coming on, Nick. Really appreciate you offering to give us some insight today.
Thank you both for having me.
So, just to start things off, would you mind giving us a little summary of your role and what you are responsible for at Frontiers?
So, with Frontiers, they are a company that started in 1996 and is based in Naples, Italy. And over the course of the past now 27 years, they've expanded into more of a global company. And around 2011, I was put in touch with them. They needed a marketing manager for the US market because they were signing a lot of US based bands and they wanted a point of contact there for those artists to work with directly. And that was me. And then around 2017, I took on a larger role with the company and became the general manager for North America for the label. So I have my tentacles covering a lot of things in that role. So I'm overseeing the marketing for the market. I'm overseeing the sales for the market. I deal with the label's social media, their advertising, all sorts of different things. And while I am based in the US and largely dealing with things here, everything's so global these days that I'm working constantly closely with the team in Italy on broader things. Marketing is can be oftentimes a global thing. It can be isolated to just a few specific countries, only one country. So everyone's coordinated and staying on the same page about what our goals are, depending on the artist.
So, you mentioned the global nature of the industry now, but do you find that there are certain, I mean, I think this is something we all recognize, but to what degree are certain genres only popular in Europe, only popular in the United States of America? How large is that divide?
Well, I think it would be hard to give quantifiable numbers, at least from my perspective about that. I mean, you can look at something like you could say hard rock is popular in largely in the English speaking territories. But then again, we have a band from India called Garesh and the Chronicles, who are very much a hard rock band, and they're playing in nice sized venues, playing festivals there in India. So I think until you've actually been to a market and you can see with your, maybe you don't have to physically go there, but really have an understanding and education, it's hard to say, well, oh, this only works here because you don't know. There could be a whole culture existing that you are just completely ignorant of. So I think that one thing I've learned over my years in the business is that rock music and metal music has a lot of reach globally. There might be markets where certain bands are just generally bigger, but I mean, you look at a band like Metallica, for example. I think they could probably go anywhere and have an audience to play to, a nice sized audience to play to. So, maybe we'll see things, for example, symphonic metal. I would say, from my perspective, that's probably more popular in Europe, but it's not that it's unpopular in North America. It's just not on the same scale that it is. I think we can agree that symphonic metal was basically birthed out of the European scene. So
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
more kind of what I mean. I think any type of music can have its niche in any country, and then the scale of that just sort of depends on the interest of the audience ultimately.
What do you think is biggest in North America for Frontiers? Because you guys got a pretty diverse roster, to say the least.
I would say, certainly the hard rock stuff. Obviously, the label made its reputation on signing Whitesnake, LA Guns, Winger, and working with those 80s hard rock bands. That's shifting a bit. We're still going to, obviously, we announced a LA Guns album today. We worked with Striper, just released their new album just a few months ago. Those bands are still going to be part of what the label does, as long as those bands want to keep writing and creating music, which, as a fan, I hope goes on for quite a long time. But there's a concerted effort to start signing younger bands, because I think we can all see that the next generation needs to start coming into play. You've obviously had some bands reach arena level status, like a Slipknot or a Lamb of God or these types of bands who are awesome. But they're already, 2 decades old at this point. So you need that next generation to come up. And I think that's what we're trying to do is sign. We're not really being genre specific. It's more of a broad hard rock and metal kind of vibe we're looking for. Goresh and the Chronicles, who I already mentioned, is a great example of that. A band like Electric Mob from Brazil is a great example of that. We have a new band called Storm Warning from the singers from Argentina, and the band and his production team are from Brazil. So there's stuff coming from literally anywhere in the world nowadays. It used to feel like, I'm going to date myself here, but when I was a teenager, if a band like Loudness came out, they seemed so exotic because they were from Japan to us, American kids. But now that's not so much the case anymore, because the way technology works and the reach a band can have outside of their home country is really, you don't say like, well, they're not from this place, so I'm a little worried about this. No, you just say, it sounds great. We can find a way to reach people.
So, considering the digital revolution and the fact that bands can release their music now completely independently, what would you say is the role of a record label now versus, and now and in the future versus in the past?
That's a really good question. And I think this has become a popular question over the past at least decade, if not a little longer. What we have here, and I think if independent labels and major labels are two entirely different things. So
Yeah,
having never, yeah, so having never been in the major label world as an employee in my life, but having worked with them from a management side, I think their benefit is in their pocketbook or checkbook, however you want to say it. Their ability to their ownership of I don't mean literal ownership, but their ability to really reach radio, especially in the U.S. market. That's more of a U.S. market specific thing. They have those kind of tentacles, right? Then you look at, say, a independent label, and I think the benefit there comes in more of the tastemaker gatekeeping kind of thing. Yes, anyone can upload their music, anyone can distribute it. If you look at the bands who are actually able to be completely self-sufficient independently, they're the exception to the rule, not the norm. Because it is so difficult to figure out how to navigate all these things, figuring out the digital distribution. Yes, which you can go to certain services and do that relatively easily. But then how do you finagle your way into the playlist pitching? How do you do this? How do you do that? And then fans are sitting there. I'm sure if you go on your Instagram feed or your Facebook feed or your TikTok feed, the ads you're getting hammered with are it's a fire hose, right?
It's unreal right now, yeah.
So you can't sit there and say, well, I'll just release the music independently. I'm really good at Facebook ads, and off I go. It's going to be tough. So I think the independent labels serve a purpose by having their branding, and they can say, the fans can say, well, if they're on that label, it's likely going to be in this general realm of a style, probably something I should check out.
Right. It's going to be a certain level of quality already. Right.
Yeah. And then you're hiring basically, in a sense, when you sign with the label, you're hiring a marketing team to front you a marketing budget and then to do the actual physical work for you. I mean, the difference nowadays is the artist has to do a lot more work than they used to in terms of, I'm always writing people, hey, can you record yourself doing a guitar solo? Hey, can you record yourself doing this? Hey, can you record yourself doing that? Hey, why isn't your Facebook or your Instagram or your whatever updated enough? Like there's a lot of hard work that the artist has to do. And they're going to have to do that signed to a label or independently. There's really no way to decrease that kind of work happening. So I think basically signing with the label is working with a company that can help you get out there more. And then, hey, if you do 4 albums with a label and you've really reached a certain point in your career where you feel like, hey, I could step back and do it myself, then hey, then you can go ahead and do that. But I think the labels really help you stay out of the general, waterfall that's pouring on fans constantly. Helps you get differentiated a little bit. But that being said, too, the labels have the same problem because we're just part of that same stream. So we're having the same difficulties cutting through the clutter as everyone else. But we have a little bit of tools to our advantage, of course.
I had a quick question just about the social media angle of things. How
Yeah.
do you kind of get the older bands like the LA Guns type of people, George Lynch's type thing, to do their social media? Like the one that seems to be good at it is Michael Sweet, obviously. Like he's always
amazing.
Yeah, he's great. He can get himself in the news just like that. I don't know how the fuck he does it, but he's amazing. But how do you kind of get the other guys to participate and see the value of social media?
Well, everybody's different. Michael is amazing. He's just, I think he enjoys it. And he's
Seems
just on there. Yeah. I mean, well, with the volume he does of posting and everything, he clearly enjoys it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be doing it. So that's just his personality and his work ethic. And I think he's doing it because he enjoys it rather than, oh, this is a task I have to accomplish. But when we're working on something with Michael, there's no stress about the social media promotion from the artist because we know Michael's going to do his thing. A guy like Tracy Guns is actually really active on his social media too, and he's putting up cool stuff like guitar solos and things people really want to see out of him. He's tuned into that. Some other artists are, I don't know. We hired somebody; they're handling it, and that's fine too, because I'd rather it be authentic than forced. So I think if you're trying to tell a band, oh, you have to do this, and they're trying to do it and they're hating it, that really kind of comes across. So it's kind of a better scenario if they say, we hate it, we need to get somebody to do it for us. That's just a better scenario. And every band is different too. So some bands you'll see the person handling their social media will say blatantly, I am not the band. Just I communicate on behalf of the band. And then other people will pretend to be the band and give that perception that it's the band talking. Either way works. It just kind of depends on the fan base and what they respond to. But at this point, to answer your question, you don't really run into anyone anymore who doesn't get that it's important. It's just whether they can commit to doing it themselves or not. But I think at this point, everybody gets, you have to have at least one platform that you're on for people to engage with. And if staying off it completely would put you in and continuing to get messaging out to your fans, you would be in very rarefied air at this point.
Well, one more question I just had on the social media is, how is it different than marketing a band from the 80s on social media versus a newer one like Seven Spires then? Because a lot of the fan base isn't going to be on Instagram, I would imagine, for like an 80s band, probably more like Facebook. Like, what's the strategy you guys use if there is one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of said it right there. If it's a band with an older fan base, Facebook, I think, has officially become the old people's platform at this
Yep,
point. So
Yep, thank
that's
you.
we're
so
all
you
on it.
hang. Yep, we're all on it. So for advertising at LA Guns is Striper, Winger, Mr. Big, Warrant, whomever. Like, hey, Facebook's going to be a go-to place for us. Um, Instagram's going to be more your younger artist or more visually oriented. They're wanting to do everything video wise. Then you have to, Adrian from Seven Spires is on Twitch. We have another band called False Memories, who's like symphonic gothic metal. They're doing a lot on Twitch because they're that age. That's where they want to be. They're enjoying playing the games. So you got to say, okay, well, we've got to kind of cater to that because that's where they're communicating with people. And I think when TikTok was first emerging, people said, oh, that's the teenager platform. But what happens is exactly what happened with Facebook was all the teenagers are on there and then all their parents came over there and then they all left and went and found something new. But TikTok's definitely got an older audience existing on there. So you're having to find ways to, well, how can we incorporate into what people are watching on TikTok to promote our product in a way that doesn't feel like crowbarred in, kind of like you do on Facebook. It's a little more blatant that you're advertising. TikTok has to be a little more subtle. So you basically look at the nature of the artist, and then you're saying, okay, if the artist is fan base is presumably this, then we have to be on this platform more. And if there's something different, then we have to go over here. So it's really on a case by case basis with the artist and who their target audience is and who their existing audience is. But everybody's on YouTube, so that's a real big one too, of course.
True, true. So let's say a band is thinking about looking for a label,
Yep.
and they want to pitch to Frontiers. What kind of statistics or metrics are you guys looking at before, like, in order to determine whether it's a band that you want to support or bring onto your label?
I think we definitely are like everyone. We look at the metrics. What are their social media numbers? Do they have any music released, and therefore, what are the numbers on Spotify? Do they have music on YouTube? What do those numbers look like? We go and look at all that stuff, and we have signed bands who have literally nothing going on, and just said, you know what, this is so good. We'll just get in on the ground floor with them and see where it goes. Other times it could be the music's doesn't feel like it's quite there yet. The numbers quite aren't there yet. Maybe we just won't go with this. So we do look at those metrics, but they're not necessarily the ultimate deciding factor. I think the narrative in the industry now is that the major labels really like to see something that's got enough of a swell that they can just pluck it and pour gasoline on it and blow it up. You'd have to ask an A&R person at a major label if that's 100% true, but that just generally seems to be the perception. With indies, I don't know, just labels I follow as a music fan. I see them, oh, we signed this new band, it's going to be awesome. And then I just, as the nature of my mind working, I go into that industry mode and I go and look the band up, and they just don't have a lot going on at all. And that just tells me the label heard the music and said, you know what, we're in. Let's figure it out together. And that's kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about independent labels and they're having a branding of their own and an audience of their own, because the label's going to say, well, this band has no audience, but if we sign them, we have a certain amount of people we can speak to that we think would like this, and just help them kind of get jump started here with their first release and career and all that kind of stuff. So to answer your question, we look at all the metrics. They don't necessarily spell doom.
They don't dictate it. Yeah, they're not the be all end all.
Yeah, exactly. Because everybody starts at zero, right? So you can't hold that. You can't hold that against everybody.
Sure. But I mean, like, a lot of labels will say they want to see bands putting in the work before they even will sign them. Is there any level of that? Like, you want to make sure that they have a good work ethic before you sign a band, or what have you?
Sure. Like you want to understand, you know, what are your ambitions? What do you see out of this? Um, do you feel like you could spend 10 years of your life dedicated to breaking your body for this kind of thing? Because that's when you're a young band, like look at Seven Spires. I'm exhausted looking at their touring schedule because I can't imagine having to go through that.
It's
But they're
crazy.
yeah, but
I'm
they're out
excited
there.
that I get to see them twice within, like, I saw them last year on tour with Dragon Force, and I'm seeing them in March also. But that's crazy.
That's fantastic that you get to see them twice in such a short period of time. I mean, they're a great band, and they put in the time. You know, they did their independent release. We signed them. They've done 2 albums so far with us. They're working on another one, but they've gotten the opportunities because that band has a very specific hard work ethic. They said we're dedicated to making this work. They're putting in the time. They're putting in the effort. Peter, the bass player, manages the band, and he's a very organized, thorough guy, which is a huge help. Like every band needs one member who is that person who's gonna herd the cats when needed. I mean, it's if you have an entire band comprised of people who are like, oh, I don't want to do that, like not much is going to happen for you. You need one person who's going to be a whip cracker and make sure that all these things are, you know, that need to be getting done are getting done. Um, but yeah, understanding that the band has a work ethic, is really to doing the work, willing to do the work, has a vision. Like, hey, this is where we are now, but maybe we see ourselves musically evolving into this. You know, there's just like some, and plans can change, and nobody has to be held to them, of course. But just knowing that an artist is thinking into the future is important to know, because some people are like, oh, I don't know, I just want to, you know, jam and do this. It's like, well, like that's not, you know, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But maybe like, what do you need a record label for if you just want to kind of hang out and do it? You can just go ahead and do that. But if you're looking to genuinely take a leap of faith and try to make a career out of it, there has to be a real serious, wide-eyed understanding of the rate of failure, and if you're willing to stare that down.
I have a quick question I just wanted to jump in on. So, like, let's say that you guys have the opportunity to, like, I realize you're not doing all the signings, obviously, but
Yeah.
like, let's say you guys have the opportunity to sign like an old school band versus a new school band, but you can only fit one in the schedule. How do you kind of determine which one you would go for, if that makes sense?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that could go into it.
Of course.
Because you know, there's if you're looking at the old school band and you're like, okay, they're basically, this is going to happen. They're going to tour. We've done the research on, you know, sales and streaming figures. This is kind of sort of we look at that and they want this much and we give them that much, and we can do a P&L. We'll make this much. That short-term reward is just tempting, extremely tempting. Whereas you're looking at something that's, well, we're going to have to do this. We'll probably lose money on the first 2 or 3 albums. You know, we don't know if it will take or not. They don't have a booking agent. There's just a lot of, it's basically a soft landing versus a potential crash landing. You know, and I think a lot of the time you're going to say, well, maybe we feel more comfortable with this more nothing's guaranteed, of course, but something that feels like more of a guaranteed outcome versus something that feels like a risk. But mercifully, we're never really in that either or situation. We usually just say yes to both.
And one other question just about this is, like a band like LA Guns or Striper or whatever, I mean, they already got a built-in fan base, they already got the built-in name. Do they still sell a lot of physical product, or is it mainly streaming nowadays, out of curiosity? Because I would think it would be more physical. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Well, the physical the amount of physical sales, like everything's to scale now.
Of course.
So if I told you their physical sales number compared to the height of their popularity, it'd be like, wow, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
Of course.
You know, but to scale, it's totally fine. So I think again, we go back to those bands kind of an older fan base. And you know, maybe they're running out of room to collect everything, or they
Sure.
just got tired of their you know, spouse told them that the CDs had to go or whatever, and they're like, oh, I'm moving to streaming, or they moved a couple times, they got sick of moving the product, you know,
Mhm.
any number of things. So those heritage acts have, you know, okay, we're going to sell X amount of physical copies, which has been that amount you're forecasting has been shrinking as the years go on, because everybody's just suddenly, not everybody, there are exceptions to the rule, of course, but most people are just shrinking in their sales, but you still get a nice little chunk of sales. And as a label, we are actively trying to encourage people to stream. I think people who are my age who are like, oh, well, I've heard that Spotify this, and you know, there's all those narratives out there about the accounting with the streaming services, and they think they're, you know, they basically think it's some sort of con job or ripoff, and that's a subject matter that is totally open for debate. And I'm not saying either way, but I am saying that the genie is out of the bottle. These streaming services exist. They're not going anywhere. At this point in time, it's hard to imagine what exactly would replace them. But how many times have we said that over the past 2 decades in the music industry? And sure enough, the next thing came along. So for now, they are the thing. I think that if you're a person who still likes buying physical product, and you see vinyls get more expensive because of all the manufacturing woes, and labels are producing less CDs because of less demand, so maybe they're a little harder to find, all these things. Listen, use a streaming service to preview what you want to spend your money on. I mean, think of it as a listening station at a record store, but it's on
That's
your
exactly
laptop.
it.
Just, okay, oh, I don't know, I heard 2 songs on YouTube, I don't want to spend my money on the album. Go listen to the entire album and make up your mind for yourself, and then go to your local record store and pick it up, or buy it from the artist, or do whatever. But I think if you're a, older music fan who kind of hates the streaming services because of all this literature you've read on the internet, then at least find a way to use it in a way that is practical for you. And I think that the listening station analogy I just made is useful. But we're actively trying to tell people, there, no offense taken by us and no offense taken by the artist, if you go stream an album on any of the major streaming services, or you're listening to it, I mean, we'll put entire album streams up on YouTube. Like, for me as a marketer, it's not about getting somebody to take out their wallet and give cash to the artist or the label. For me, we're battling for people's time. You guys are busy, I'm busy. I find it so hard just to sit down and listen to an album. That's why I'm mostly listening to punk and hardcore lately, because I need 20-minute albums. Because I'm still the person who likes to listen to albums. I just need them to be shorter because I'm so pressed for time all the time. But that's what you're battling for. People, like, you're competing with all the television on Netflix and Hulu and all this stuff. People they have their kids. They have, if they don't have kids, they have any number of activities going on. You're asking people for their time, and I think when you're asking people for their time, you need to be very respectful of the fact that you're asking for it. So what we're trying to do is just say, hey, if you've got 3 to 5 minutes to check this out, whether it be on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, we'd really appreciate it. Let us know how you like it. If you do like it, there's more music. Here's a CD. Here's an LP. You could get, the artist is going on tour. Go see them. No, but that first entry point is just respectfully asking for a few minutes of someone's time to give something a try, and that's why I think it's important to try to get, you know, when we're talking about the LA Guns and the Stripers and the Wingers, to get their fan base to understand that it's okay to stream an album. If you can't spend the money on a CD right now, or you just don't have time to go to the record store to buy it or do whatever. It's okay. Watch the video, stream the single on Spotify. No harm, no foul. No one's going to get upset. It helps. It all helps in the long run.
I really think that that perspective is so positive, like such a beneficial perspective. We're in an economy of time nowadays. There's so much stimulus, and you really want to meet people where they're at. So all these musicians, they may not want to be on TikTok. They may not want to be doing this content on other platforms, but it's so beneficial, and it is respectful, like you said, to just meet people where they're at and ask for their time. So I just really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, if you're a label or an artist working independently or whatever, and you're thinking about the marketing, don't get hung up and like, oh, we've got to achieve this amount of streams or this amount of sales, or don't get hung up on that part. Try to remember what it's like to be a consumer yourself, what your habits are, what you like, what you don't like. For me personally, I go to the record store and flip through the bins and buy the records. I order from band websites. I order from label websites. I order from Amazon. I go to the shows and buy the numbered, limited edition poster and live through the experience of, please God, don't let a beer get spilled on this, for the 4 hours while you're trying to protect it. If you're going to be a person who can really get good at marketing, I think it's important to live as a consumer and not get used to the perks of being on one side of the fence. You have to live on the other side with everybody else. Understand the stress that goes into hopping onto Ticketmaster to try to buy a ticket for a show that is going to sell out, and you're really stressed about, like, what's the price going to be? Am I going to get? I just went through this with Metallica a few months ago. Totally one of my favorite bands of all time. Totally stressed out about the process of getting tickets for the show I wanted to go to. But it's important to know what that, have that, like, butterflies in your stomach feels like as a fan, and live through these processes, because when you're doing that, then you're understanding how to talk to people on their level. And that's really what it boils down to. Not, sure, there's gimmicks you can pull off and stuff like that are a lot of fun, especially when they work. But for the most part, you really just kind of want to understand that, music is largely an emotional thing for people, and get on that level with them and understand how to talk to them about it, like a fan, from one fan to another. And that's really what it's got to be about.
Awesome. So for one final topic, I guess, could you give us a tip or two that you would advise for younger bands who want it, what their next step is, shopping to a label? What tips do you have for them?
Well, the number one thing, and this is obvious, and I don't think I'll even count this as one of the tips, is
That's fair. Fair.
have great songs. That's
Oh,
what
yes.
I used to work for a guy who had a sign up in the office that said, "It's about the music, dummy," and
Yeah.
that's really what it's about. So obviously, when you feel like you have the songs, the first tip is, don't be scared of, upset by, or worried about rejection. It's going to be inevitable. You're going to hear you suck. You're going to hear you're not ready. You're going to hear this, that, and the other thing. It's normal. It's part of the process. Hopefully, some of the criticism is constructive that you can take back and put it to use. But, if you don't get that, it's okay. I've seen bands react really poorly to being told nicely that, hey, this isn't a good fit for what we're doing. What? But we sound just like this band, and don't do that. Don't say you sound just like another band, because that's not necessarily what a label wants to hear. They may, if they draw that conclusion on their own, that's fine. But don't be offended. A no is a no. Just say, okay, thank you for the feedback. Hey, in a year's time, we might have some new songs. I would love to circle back. Kind of try to leave the door open. Most people at labels are going to be super nice about that, because they're thinking the same thing. What if this guy goes and writes the second coming of Van Halen 1 in the 2 years I don't speak to him? I want him to remember me as a relatively nice person, so that they might circle back to me. So that's the main thing. Just, to not get upset, be kind to people, and keep the door open. The second thing would be to really show that you're a self-starting kind of band. Make sure your socials look nice. They're showing a lot of activity. Try to show that you're out there playing gigs. And listen, if you're only doing 6 gigs a year, that's okay. But you can make it look like a lot more than it is, because perception's reality, right? So if you're putting up flyers about gigs all the time and just making it seem like it's a big deal, and then you're collecting a bunch of footage from those gigs and putting it up, it just looks like there's a lot of activity. That's really important to do. But if you're a band trying to get on a label, you're going to need to know how to do that stuff anyway while you're waiting to get on a label. You're going to need to know how to book the shows and have your upkeep of your social media. But when a label looks and it's like, wow, these guys are really putting in the time or effort, that's a positive right off the bat. So I think it's about presentation. It's almost like if you're a band, it's like you're on a dating app almost, and you want to have the nicest pictures and all these kind of things, and for the labels to see. Don't have junky looking, website. Don't have a junky looking social media. If you're doing artwork, make it look cool. Have it. It doesn't have to be necessarily pristine. I've seen bands who are just like, you look at punk bands who do things where their artwork is scratched stick figures, but it's their aesthetic, it's their thing, and that works for them. So just have a great presentation, but don't get too hung up on what's perfect, because as they say, perfect can be the enemy of good.
Excellent. Thank you so, so much again for coming on the podcast. This was great. I learned a lot. And everyone listening, I hope you learned a lot too. And until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.